Hello and welcome to Educating Matt Powell, Part 1. Part 1 of N, where N is likely to be a large integer because when it comes to misunderstanding science and misrepresenting science and generally bad ideas, Matt is the gift that keeps on giving. Now this first part and a couple of the subsequent parts are based on a conversation that Matt had with Jackson Wheat. Jackson's one of my favourite YouTubers. I didn't include him in my list of favourite atheist YouTubers because despite the fact that Jackson has a YouTube channel and is an atheist, I usually think of his channel more as educational. If you really want to know what biological research is actually saying, what the papers really say, then Jackson's channel is the place to find out all about evolution, abiogenesis, lots and lots of current work that's being done.
So, without further ado, let's listen to a short clip of the conversation that Matt Powell had with Jackson Wheat.
It has to be demonstrable and testable and provable, otherwise it's not science. Well, I don't know how somebody can actually determine what the rate of burn is with the sun. Like scientists say, hey, the sun's burning up 250 tons a second or whatever. Well, the thing is, there's no way we could even get close enough to make those measurements. There's no way we could make those measurements. So, we can't demonstrate it, we can't test it, and we certainly can't.
So, this is the individual in question. This is a picture of Matt Powell. He's 22 years old at the time of my recording in 2019. These people here have been about since 1998. So basically, they've been about for virtually all of Mr. Powell's life. A quick Google using experiment energy from sun yielded lots of results. Typing the same in YouTube revealed the following video from Professor Brian Cox. If only somebody who's been around for the whole of the time that Google has been around knew how to Google stuff.
So how much energy does fall on the surface of the Earth from the sun? You can work it out with a beautifully simple experiment using only a thermometer, a tin full of water and an umbrella. Basically, you let the water heat up in the tin to ambient temperature, which here in Death Valley today is about 46 degrees Celsius. And then you put the thermometer in the water and you take the shade away and let the sun shine on the water.
In direct sunlight, the water temperature begins to rise. By timing how long it takes the sun to raise the water temperature by 1 degree Celsius, you can figure out exactly how much energy the sun has delivered into the can of water. And from that, how much energy is delivered to a square metre of the surface.
And this is precisely why you shouldn't get your science from people like this, and you should get your science from people like this. So back to Brian's experiment. It was a fairly simple experiment, a bucket of water and a thermometer, and don't forget the umbrella. We could use Newton's law of cooling when cooling it back down to increase the accuracy of our measurements. In order to cool it down, you just put the shade back over. You can find K by taking measurements as it cools back to ambient. In the equation here, theta naught is the ambient temperature that Brian spoke about, and K is a constant. But we don't even need to do that experiment. When Skylab was flying, you could have measured the energy from the sun from space without any atmospheric interference at all. You could measure it from the International Space Station, or even dedicated probes such as the Parker Solar Probe. So let's imagine that we'd done this experiment using very, very accurate equipment, and we get a figure of 1,367 watts per square meter. We want the number of watts that strikes the whole of the Earth. So, imagine that the Earth is a sphere, which it is to a first approximation. The energy hitting here at the equator is going to be more intense or more focused than it is up here where there's more curvature. We can compensate for this. If we imagine that the energy is hitting a hemisphere of an area 2 pi r squared, if we flatten the Earth, then we can imagine that it's distributed evenly. So we flatten it to a circle. If you think about the profile of the Earth that faces the Sun, it's a circle. The radius of this circle is 6,371,000 meters. So to work out the energy that strikes the whole of the Earth's surface, we do pi times the radius squared times the amount of energy on 1 square meter. And that gives us approximately 1.74 times 10 to the 17 watts. And note that 1 watt is 1 joule per second. So this is a lot of energy. So we can consider the energy released by the Sun every second as an expanding sphere. So if the Sun is here, there's some energy released. Let's say that's the energy released in a second, and it radiates outwards. Eventually, it will reach the orbit of the Earth, which is 149.6 million kilometers from the Sun on average. So I've converted that to meters just here. Now, that energy is spread out over the surface of this sphere. And the surface area for a sphere is 4 times pi times the radius squared. So if we want to know how much energy is being released by the Sun, all we need to do is work out the energy across the surface of this sphere. So that's 4 times pi times the radius squared times the 1,367, which we met before, which is the energy that we measured per square meter on the Earth's surface. If we calculate that, we get 3.84 times 10 to the 26 watts, or 3.84 times 10 to the 26 joules per second. If we actually get the figure from Google, it's 3.86 times 10 to the 26. So we're only just out. And it's possibly because of the rounded number that I used for the radius. So how much mass does the Sun lose in producing this amount of energy? Well, we can work that out as well. So we've worked out that the energy produced by the Sun is about 3.86 times 10 to the 26 joules per second. We know energy is equal to mc squared, where c is the speed of light in meters per second. So 3.86 times 10 to the 26 is equal to m multiplied by 3 times 10 to the 8 squared. Rearrange and calculate. And that gives us about 4.29 times 10 to the 9 kilograms. Now, the actual figure that I got from Google was about 6 times 10 to the 12 grams per second. So clearly, all of the mass that it's losing is not due to the production of energy. So what else could it be? Well, comparing here, this figure, 6 times 10 to the 12 grams per second, which is 6 times 10 to the 9 kilograms, you can see that we're a bit out. We've got 4.29 times 10 to the 9. However, the solar wind is a stream of energized charged particles, electrons and protons, flowing outward from the sun. There's also a lot of neutrinos coming out of the sun. Now, they don't have very much mass individually, but there's a lot of them. So these sorts of things could account for the discrepancy between my calculation and this number here. But note, I'm not out by an order of magnitude. So at this stage, I've got to ask, was that really that difficult to look up? And Matt, you said about science has got to be testable and repeatable. You could do this yourself. You could get a bucket, you could fill it with water, you could put it out in the garden with a thermometer in it. You might need to look up a few things, like the specific heat capacity of water, but none of this is actually beyond you. So how you can sit there and say you don't see how anybody can do this, I just don't understand that. Just look it up.